And that goes into our next slide, which is understanding. When we really kind of understand where other people are at, it does really honestly make a big difference. For example, I was in a situation with a parent that was upset because she she didn't understand when the break was for spring break. And rather than calling me up and asking me about it, she accessed social media and started talking to different staff members on social media rather than looking at the LCPS website, rather than trying to contact me. She went through other alternative ways. Well, what ended up happening was she took her son to grandma's house for what she thought was spring break, and it wasn't spring break. We were still in school. So he ended up losing out on services for an entire week. And, it's because you have to be able to follow the process. The process is there for a reason. And as much as we may disagree with it, we do have to an extent, be able to play with it. But we have to be able to play by the rules. So if you feel that something isn't working for you or isn't functional, at least sit the teacher down and have a calm conversation about it. I think that that's really going to be a big step, because as you can see within this slide, that's what we call thinking win-win. And when we think win-win, everybody is in a situation where we can benefit. There is no loser in the situation. And that's ultimately what we want, because when the IEP team is in agreement and there's win-win, ultimately good things can happen for kids. But again, I know there's situations that are out there that are not happening. For example, when I was at the Parents Reaching Out conference, and I'm actually really glad that I am recording this this lecture after I went to Parents Reaching Out, because there were some people that were in some situations that were just hard. And I have no words to describe what they were going through. Parents that were not getting funding from their particular waiver programs that they needed for services for the child. Or schools were just saying, well, we don't have that staff member to provide these ancillary services, so you're just not going to get that this year. Well, again, that's unacceptable, and that's not win-win. So, I'm not telling you necessarily to back off, but what I'm telling you again is to really be focused on what is the issue, because this is about the kid, and that's what the IEP team should always be focused on, is what is best for the child. And when we do that, I really do believe that it is thinking win-win, and because ultimately the kid is the one that needs to benefit. Okay, your rights and ideas. I posted a PDF file with kind of, how do I want to say this? They are your rights, okay? They are written in a very parent-friendly format of your rights. So IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And when you're in special education, by default, there's certain rights, certain safeguards to protect you and your child and your family. Okay, so as you can see, let me go. Okay, so it says that you have a right really quick to a prior written notice. Okay, so what exactly is a prior written notice? What that means is that the school district cannot implement something that is within the realm of special education without letting you know that they're going to do that. So for example, let's say that you're in the SAT process, okay, and you don't really know what's going to happen. The school administrators and the teachers cannot just say, well, we've decided your child needs to be in a special education classroom. And they just kind of make that decision without you or without having an IEP. Again, I don't know your situation. I did hear some horror stories when I was at Parents Reaching Out, where some parents told me that they were in that situation where the school was doing things and holding IEPs without even letting them know. No, that is a direct violation against your rights. So they have to let you know what they're going to do before they do it. And that goes into number 2, that they have the right to give, you have the right to give your consent, and you also have the right to take it away. So you do not have to necessarily accept special education. But if your kid really needs it and the data is really pointing in that way, it's one of those things that you really need to sit down with your family and with an advocate such as myself, or individuals at Parents Reaching Out, to see what kind of options you have. Because from what I've kind of seen in my experience, where parents have really kind of, I don't want to say get angry at IEPs, because they weren't. But because of the disability that I work with, the population of disability that I work with, and they're also so young, they're babies, they parents are scared. And I can relate. When my son was born in June 2016, um, he was immediately rushed to the NICU just due to some health problems. So, spoiler alert, he's doing really well now. He's meeting his milestones. But when he was rushed to the NICU, I didn't even get to hold him for the first time. You know, those magical moments of skin to skin. No, there was none of that. He was rushed, and I actually didn't even see him. Whew. The original plan was for me to see him the next morning because I felt really exhausted myself. But then later that night, I had complications. So I want to say that I didn't see him until day 2. Yeah, I think that's what it was. And when I was released from the hospital 3 days later, um, yeah, he was in the NICU for 2 weeks. Um, every single day was hard. Okay, so leading up to a week, I was kind of holding it together. It was hard, but I was holding it together. I knew it was going to be hard. And it wasn't until he had already been there for a week, I was expecting to take him home, and that didn't happen. I fell apart. And it, yeah, it was one of those things that when you're in a situation that's scary, you're you're not going to be the most pleasant person to be around. I know I wasn't. I was a mess. I was just such a hot mess. But I think that anybody who has been in a situation like that can really relate. And that's the reason why I constantly stress on the words IEP team. You may not necessarily agree with everything that these people are saying. However, I know, at least from my own experience as being a teacher, you want the best for every single one of your students. And the reality is, because now that I've been on both sides of the fence, and I've been now a parent where I've been in a very hard situation, and now I've also been the teacher where I'm having to give advice that is hard to hear. I know that I really want the best for your kid, and I'm going to do everything that I can to make that happen. And I really hope that you're in a situation with teachers that want that for your child as well. So again, it kind of goes back into seeing what drives the teacher, what motivates them. And maybe it could be just a simple misunderstanding, because I know there was one particular staff member at the hospital that I did not like her. And it was one of those situations where I just had to get out. Um, And I don't want to necessarily say anybody was right, anybody was wrong in that situation. Um, but I do know that if I were to be in the NICU again, hopefully I'm not with the next baby, but if I ever am again, I'll know better how to talk to these people in order to make a hard situation just a little bit easier, because that's essentially what you're trying to go for.